area to catch some spotted day bass. So I'd like to have everybody come here tonight and welcome for Ron Buhler.
Yeah, it was a pleasure being here in December. How many people were here in December? Oh, that's cool. That was good. That was fun. Well, tonight I'm gonna do. I got a whole bunch of stuff to donate here. He was mentioning manufacturers or manufacturers reps. Well, this was once a hobby of mine, and I was just thinking about it here a minute ago. That was 1991, so that was like 22 years ago. And I fished in a bass fishing club. Jason, you mentioned bass. Did you mean calicos and those things, or did you mean bass? Okay. Usually when we say bass, we're talking about that green fish. But you know, half of the world is captivated by that fish. Well, that fish was the fish that I used to that's all I used to think about when it came to fishing, was the bass fish, the largemouth bass. And I had this idea way back then that there ought to be a way to make a piece of plastic more attractive to a fish besides just appealing to his visual instincts. So that's when I think the only really scents around at that time were licorice and then they would call it things like bait fish, I think they called it, but it was licorice, that's what it was. It was anise. And there's a reason why anise will catch fish. Anise is, in the world of science, I'm getting overly, I was going to move the table out here. Maybe I'll move that. Can you move that table over here? That way I can stick some products out there. All these products that I'm going to show you, I'm going to donate to you guys so you guys can raffle these.
Put the rod in there too.
Yeah, well, this rod is old. I brought it on purpose. This is a flipping stick. You don't know what a flipping stick is. See, that's a bass fishing thing. When I say bass, I mean largemouth, right? That's
Freshwater.
Yeah, that's a bass. I know that calicos and sand bass and spotted bass, those are all bass, but the flipping stick was developed for freshwater bass fishing. Specifically, I don't even know if they make it like this anymore, but see, this rod drops down so it fits in your rod locker, and then in largemouth bass fishing, the longest your rod can be is 7 feet. So you can't use, they used to use things, they used to use rods that were really long, and they used to call them dipping rods. And dipping rods were different because it really wasn't even necessary to have a reel. I'm getting so off track. This is where you start to get in there's the difference between a rod and a pole. Have you ever heard of a fishing pole? What was your name, Joe? Have you ever heard of a fishing pole? Well, do you know the difference between a fishing pole and a fishing rod? What is it? Not to put you on the spot, but if you know that, I'm really impressed. Here's the difference. You probably were going to say this, but these little rings on here, if it has rings, it's a rod. If it has no rings, it's a pole. So when we say get your fishing pole, that was what I was calling a dipping rod, or a dipping pole. And what it was just a line on the end, and they used to stick it into the tulies, and that's how they would catch bass, right out of the tulies. Well, then of course, if you're a bass fisherman, you realize that's not going to be good enough. You got to make it better, and that's half the fun of bass fishing, largemouth bass fishing, is making things better. And I know this is really creeped over into saltwater, especially what we call nearshore or coastal fishing, as opposed to what we would call blue water fishing or deep sea fishing.
Go Jerry! Go Jerry!
That was good. Hey, one thing I love it. We want to. I want to keep this light too. And if you guys have questions, some of you guys have been fishing longer than me, and you can teach me stuff. I know that for a fact. Yes, sir.
Guys, the end of the line on that last little ring there, would that be a pole?
If you take the guides off, yeah. You gotta take the guides off, where it's still a rod with the line tied at the end. You know, these days we have Google, right? You know about Google yet? Okay, well that's the internet, right? Only this much safe. There's like little spaces in there that are good. But I Google everything. Google is like a dictionary. We look things up, or encyclopedias. Like if you want to say, what's the name Joe come from? It comes from Joseph, right? Okay, so that's what you would do with Google. So if you want to see the difference between a fishing rod and a hole, maybe it would be there. So, but anyway, I like to keep it light. You know, if you guys want to ask questions, I like that. So, getting back to what I was saying. Originally, I was like, okay, there's only licorice. And I'm fishing bass tournaments, and I'm thinking, okay, I got this piece of plastic. You know, we can't use live bait for bass fishing, and we can't use prepared bait, which would be like strips of squid or night crawlers that are dead or leeches that are preserved. You can't use those kind of things in tournament fishing. So I was like, well, how can I make a piece of plastic better? So I started ruining a lot of my wife's blenders and utensils in the kitchen, and you know, getting her upset. And, you know, she's like, "That's my good bowl." I'm like, "It looks like the same as any bowl," you know. So she gave me a lot of her Tupperware once I ruined it, and some of the first things I created, I would have a product made like Wednesday, let's say. My tournament would be Saturday. And it looked really good, it smelled really good. I knew it was going to be good because of all the great ingredients that I put in it. And then Saturday morning, I would open it up, and I was vaguely familiar with the bacteria called botulism and things like that. So I was thinking this could probably kill somebody. So it's probably a good idea that I just threw that lid back on and then get rid of that later. Well, that took 2.5 years to develop a product that some of you have probably heard of, and it's called hot sauce. Okay?
Yeah.
So this is a product that I invented 22 years ago. And it's really been a phenomenon because originally, if you ever were at some of those Fred Hall shows back in the early day, I never gave a sample away for free. All I ever did was I put it in a little screw jar lid thing, and I sold those for $1 with a coupon in the package for $1 off of a bottle of hot sauce. And then what I did was I took a number of cases of hot sauce. The first store I ever gave a case to was Anglers Marine. The second one was the Jig Stop in Dana Point. Okay, so I gave a number of cases of hot sauce, 12 bottles of hot sauce. I went in there and I said, here's the product called hot sauce. And if somebody comes in here to buy it, it's going to be $10. And then if you sell it, I'll come back and collect it and we'll go from there. So then I went all over the place and gave away those, or sold those samples at every kind of fishing show that I could find. I would go there and sell those samples. I figured if I give a sample away for free, somebody will take it and probably just forget about it. But if a guy's willing to pay $1 to try something, I figured, you know what, he'll at least try it. So I sold those things for $1, and then every store would call me up and go, hey, I'm out of hot sauce, and I got 6 of those little dollar bills. They looked like $1 bill, but instead of a president on there, there was a crayfish on the front, right? And I collected those things and gave them back $1. So I still have some of those little old coupons, but that was the first product that started the whole thing. The way this really started was I was using it for my own personal use in tournaments and having great success with it, but I shared it with a friend of mine. He's a guide out here now named Robert Reither. I don't know if any of you know Robert Reither, but I gave some to him, and then he would use like a little, they used to be in vitamin jars, and he would use a whole jar of it in a night. And at that point, it was probably costing me at least $50 a jar to make it. You know, and I'd say, Robert, you gotta like use that stuff sparingly. I use like, yeah, I know, but we're catching so many fish. I gotta have more of that stuff. So then finally I started charging him, trying to cover my costs, and then he would share it with his clientele, and then they'd come into my jewelry store. Some of you may know me as a jeweler. I do that full time. So they come into my jewelry store and they say, hey, do you have any of that fishing stuff? And my customers would look at him like, are you stupid? This is a jewelry store. Why are you asking for fishing stuff? You know, there's a Turner's right down the parking lot here. Go to Turner's. This is not Turner's. And I'd say, no, it's okay. Come back. Come back like it, help it out. And they'd be like, I'd say, it's okay. It's a long story. Sometimes I have to explain it, and sometimes I wouldn't, but it's all good. So that started, and I'm like, I got to get this out of my jewelry store. When I was playing with it originally, a lot of people don't know this, I called it Bass Cologne. That's what I called it. Because I was only bass fishing with it. That's all I was doing. So I said, I got to think of something that's more broad spectrum, you know, because he's using it in salt water, and I use it in fresh water. and it works equally well in both fresh and salt, is it has more than 5 fish in that bottle. So I said, you know, I got